Before we start, if you enjoy the story, please leave a like and check if you're subscribed. The security door sparked and died under Rowan Ashford's plasma cutter, metal peeling back like burned skin. He killed the tool's power and listened. Somewhere in the facility's depths, machinery hummed, but no alarms shrieked, no boots pounded toward him. The distress signal he'd intercepted 3 days ago had been coded in a frequency that shouldn't exist, biological, pulsing like a heartbeat, speaking a language his equipment couldn't translate, but his instincts understood. Someone was dying in there. He slipped through the gap, weapon drawn, and immediately wished he hadn't come. The corridor stretched before him, lined with containment cells, each one a window into suffering. Things that might have been beautiful once pressed against transparent barriers with too many limbs, too many eyes, bodies twisted by whatever experiments had been conducted here. Some cells were dark. He didn't look too closely at those. His scanner led him deeper, past rooms filled with equipment he recognized from his own research days, before he'd walked away from the xenobiology community and their convenient ethics. The signal strengthened, pulling him toward the facility's heart. The final chamber made his stomach turn. Dozens of cells, most empty now, their occupants reduced to waste in the corner drains. But in the back, in a cage too small for the creature inside, something moved. She was blue, fox-like, her fur matted with filth and her own blood. Pointed ears lay flat against her skull, forelegs splayed at wrong angles too weak to support her. But her eyes, golden, luminous even in the dim light, tracked his approach with sharp intelligence. She didn't make a sound. Rowan holstered his weapon and knelt before the cage. The lock was biometric, meant to keep her in, but his override codes from the old days still worked on black market equipment. The door clicked open. She tried to crawl backward and collapsed. "Easy," he said, keeping his voice low and steady. "I'm not here to hurt you." She bared small fangs, a kitten's threat, and his heart broke at the defiance in something so close to death. He stripped off his jacket and reached in slowly, wrapping her in the fabric before she could bite. She thrashed once, whimpered, and went still. Through the material, he felt her heart hammering against ribs he could count. She weighed almost nothing. The return to his ship took an hour. Every shadow might hide security, every sound might mean discovery, but he'd disabled the facility's communication array on his way in. By the time anyone noticed, he'd be 3 systems away. The creature, the cub, he decided, watching her labored breathing, stayed quiet in his arms, those gold eyes fixed on his face. His research station clung to the edge of an ancient forest on a world so remote it didn't have a name, just coordinates. The trees here grew tall enough to scrape the lower atmosphere, their canopy filtering sunlight into emerald twilight. He'd chosen isolation deliberately, and now he was grateful for it. Inside, he cleared his medical workbench and laid her down. The jacket fell away. In better light, she was stunning, her fur a deep cobalt blue that seemed to shimmer with each breath, darker markings tracing elegant patterns along her legs and spine. But she was starving, dehydrated, and covered in wounds that looked deliberately inflicted. Rowan worked through the night. IV fluids first, electrolyte balance, broad-spectrum antibiotics that might or might not work on her alien biology. He cleaned her wounds, cataloged 3 broken bones, stitched lacerations with steady hands while talking to her constantly. "You're safe now," he murmured, injecting a painkiller. "No one's going to hurt you here, I've got you." She watched him through it all, never looking away, as if memorizing his face. Toward dawn, her breathing steadied. He'd moved her to a nest of blankets near the thermal unit, and she'd managed to lift her head once, sniffing weakly at his hand. He fell asleep sitting against the wall, watching her chest rise and fall. 3 months became a pattern. She healed faster than he'd expected, her broken bones knitting in weeks instead of months. When she could stand, she followed him everywhere, a blue shadow at his heels. When she could run, she turned the forest into her hunting ground, learning to bring down prey with growing skill while he documented everything, still uncertain what species she was. She didn't vocalize much beyond small chirps and huffs, but she understood him. When he called, she came. When he sat to work, she curled against his leg. At night, she slept pressed against his back, her warmth seeping through his shirt. He named her Amaris one evening, watching her play in the bioluminescent moss that carpeted the forest floor. She'd pounced on a light beetle, missed, tumbled through the glowing vegetation, and looked back at him with what he swore was embarrassment. The name meant child of the moon in an old earth language, and it fit her, something beautiful and wild and touched by mystery. The first time he felt the warmth in his chest, they were caught in a thunderstorm. She'd always hated thunder, would press herself against him and shake. This time, huddled together in his small sleeping quarters while rain hammered the station's roof, she buried her face against his chest and heat bloomed behind his sternum. Not painful, but profound, like something settling into place. His biometric monitor chirped an alert, unknown energy signature detected, origin unknown, analyzing. He checked the readout, found nothing but interference patterns, dismissed it as electromagnetic feedback from the storm. The sensation faded when the thunder passed, but something had changed. When she looked at him now, he felt an echo of her emotions, her contentment, her trust, her fierce joy when they hunted together. He told himself it was just pattern recognition, his brain finding meaning in her body language. But late at night, when she slept curled in the curve of his body and that warmth pulsed in his chest like a second heartbeat, he knew he was lying to himself. Something was growing between them that had nothing to do with science. 15 months after dragging her half-dead from that cage, Rowan watched Amaris take down a ridge elk twice her size and wondered when exactly she'd stopped being his research subject and become his partner. She'd grown into her frame, sleek muscle moving under blue fur that caught the dappled forest light. Her shoulders reached his hip now, her movements liquid grace as she circled the fallen prey. She glanced back at him, ears perked forward, waiting. "Clean kill," he said, approaching with his field knife. She made a pleased sound, somewhere between a chirp and a purr, and began her own work, tearing into the carcass with efficiency she'd learned through careful observation of him. They'd developed a rhythm over the months. She brought down the prey. He performed the precise cuts for preservation. They shared the spoils, equal partners. The forest provided everything they needed. Rowan had long since stopped pretending he was conducting research. His logs had become sporadic, his academic interests abandoned. He tracked Amaris's development, yes, but only because understanding her kept her safe. The xenobiology community that had exiled him for questioning their methods could burn for all he cared. This was enough. This was everything. They carried the meat back to the station as afternoon bled into evening. Amaris ranged ahead, investigating scents, doubling back to check on him, her tail, full and magnificent now, held high with confidence. She'd become a formidable predator, but she still slept against him every night, still sought his touch when she was tired or uncertain. Inside the station, Rowan prepared their meal while Amaris sprawled across the floor, grooming blood from her paws. He'd constructed a low platform for her months ago, but she preferred the space near his workbench, where she could watch him move around the small living area. "You know, we're going to run out of freezer space," he said, seasoning the elk steaks. She huffed, a sound he'd learned meant disagreement or dismissal. "I'm serious. You hunt like you're feeding an army." Amaris lifted her head, fixed him with those gold eyes, and he felt it. Amusement, tinged with affection. The sensation bloomed in his chest, warm and certain, and he no longer questioned it. The bond, whatever it was, had become as natural as breathing. He'd researched obsessively those first few months when the warmth appeared, diving into restricted databases, pulling fragments from encrypted files. The word Vrykari appeared repeatedly, always associated with bonding protocols and royal bloodlines. He'd found references to a feline-like species from the Galactic core, mentions of empathic connections, warnings about soul-bonding compatibility with non-Vrykari species. Then he'd triggered something, a security flag probably buried in the classified data, and stopped searching. Because the alternative to knowing was keeping her, and he'd already decided which mattered more. After dinner, he settled into his evening routine, reviewing supply inventories, maintaining equipment, updating his personal logs. Amaris brought him her grooming brush in her mouth, dropped it at his feet, and sat expectantly. Rowan smiled. "Demanding tonight, aren't we?" She bumped his leg with her head, insistent. He sat on the floor and she immediately sprawled across his lap, too large now to really fit but determined anyway. He brushed her fur in long, steady strokes, working through tangles, checking for parasites or injuries. Her purr vibrated through his legs, that contentment radiating through the bond and settling into his own chest. His fingers traced the dark markings along her spine, elegant whorls that seemed almost intentional, like tattoos. Beautiful. She was beautiful and deadly and absolutely trusting in a way that still staggered him. "What are you really?" he murmured, more to himself than her. She twisted to look at him, those intelligent eyes holding his for a long moment. Then she licked his hand once and settled back down. 3 hours past midnight, the perimeter alarm screamed. Rowan was on his feet instantly, weapon drawn, scanning the security feeds. Amaris had already positioned herself between him and the door, hackles raised, a low growl building in her chest that he'd never heard before. The feeds showed movement, large shapes circling the station, too coordinated to be wildlife. 4 of them, maybe 5, their heat signatures reading wrong, too hot, too controlled. "Stay behind me," he said, knowing she wouldn't. The door buckled inward. Amaris launched herself at it with a snarl that sent ice down his spine. The metal tore free, and things poured through. Predators, definitely predators, with scaled hides and too many teeth, hunting as a pack. Rowan fired twice, dropping the lead creature. Amaris met the second in mid-leap, her jaws closing on its throat, her momentum carrying them both into the wall. The third came for him. He sidestepped, drove his knife into its spine, pulled the blade free, and pivoted to find the fourth. It had gotten past him, had Amaris cornered against the workbench. She was smaller, younger, and it knew. The creature lunged. She dodged, but not fast enough. Claws raked across her shoulder, spinning her sideways. Blood sprayed across the floor. Something in Rowan's chest ignited, not warmth this time, but heat, searing and absolute. He felt Amaris's pain like his own, felt her fear and rage and desperate determination, and he moved. Later, he wouldn't remember crossing the distance. He'd remember his knife finding the creature's eye, remember riding it down as it thrashed, remember cutting until it stopped moving. He'd remember Amaris's presence in his mind, bright and fierce, lending him strength he shouldn't have. The last attacker fled into the forest. Silence crashed back into the station. Rowan dropped to his knees beside Amaris, hands already assessing the wound. Deep, but not fatal, missing major vessels by centimeters. "I've got you," he said, voice shaking as he pressed sterile gauze to her shoulder. "You're okay. You're going to be okay." She leaned into him, trembling, and he felt her trust like a physical weight. He carried her to the medical bench, worked through the night cleaning and suturing the wound, pumping her full of antibiotics and painkillers. She never made a sound, just watched his face while he worked. Dawn found them on the floor, Rowan's back against the wall, Amaris curled in his lap with her head tucked under his chin. The bond pulsed between them, stronger now, undeniable. He stroked her ears gently, careful of the bandages wrapping her shoulder. "I won't let anything hurt you again," he whispered into her fur. "I promise." She sighed, a long, shuddering breath, and he felt her absolute faith in that promise. It terrified him, because he'd started to suspect what she was, what the bond meant, and he knew that eventually someone would come looking. He just hadn't expected it to be so soon. The next morning, his long-range scanner picked up incoming ships, 5 of them dropping out of FTL in perfect formation, making no attempt at stealth. The lead vessel's signature was unlike anything in his database, organic and mechanical signatures blended, power output that could level continents. Rowan checked his weapons, knowing they were useless. Checked his data, knowing he should have run months ago. Looked at Amaris, who'd positioned herself at the door again, staring up at the sky she couldn't see through the station's roof, but somehow knew held something important. Her tail was raised high, not in fear this time. In recognition. The warmth in his chest exploded into fire as the first ship descended through the canopy. Amaris threw her head back and made a sound he'd never heard, a keen, high, and piercing that carried through the forest and echoed off the trees. Above them, the ships answered with sounds that shook the ground. Rowan's scanner identified the lead ship's signature finally, pulling data from some deep archive. Vrykari Imperial vessel, clearance level sovereign. He looked down at Amaris, who looked back at him with those gold eyes that suddenly seemed far older than her months. "What have I done?" he whispered. The station's external speakers crackled to life. A voice spoke, feminine and cold, and carrying absolute authority. "This is Empress Alirai of the Vrykari Dominion. You are harboring Imperial property. Surrender the heir and you will be granted a swift execution. Resist and you will learn what it means to suffer." Amaris pressed against his leg. Through the bond he felt her certainty, her choice, her absolute refusal to leave him. Rowan holstered his weapon and walked to the door, one hand resting on Amaris's head. "Let's go meet your mother," he said quietly. The door opened to reveal an Empress, and behind her an empire ready to burn his world to ash. The Vrykari surrounded his station like a living barrier, 20 warriors in formation, each one carrying weapons that hummed with barely restrained energy. But Rowan only saw her. Empress Alirai stood at the center of her guard, and she was magnificent. Taller than him by half a head, her blue skin bore the same deep cobalt hue as Amaris, but richer, shot through with silver markings that traced her arms and disappeared beneath armor that looked grown rather than forged. Her ears swept back from a face that mixed vulpine elegance with something undeniably regal. Her hair, long and flowing, shifting between blue and white like moonlight on water, moved in a wind that didn't exist. Her eyes were gold like Amaris's, but ancient, weighing him with the kind of judgment reserved for insects beneath notice. "You will release my daughter," she said. "Now." Amaris stepped forward, placing herself between Rowan and her mother, and growled low, warning, protective. Something flickered across Eliray's face. Her eyes dropped to her daughter, then rose back to Rowan, and he saw the exact moment she felt it. The Empress went rigid, one hand pressed to her chest, fingers splayed wide. "What have you done?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "I saved her life," Rowan said. 18 months ago, I found her dying in an illegal research facility. I brought her here. I healed her." "You bonded with her." It wasn't a question. Alirai stepped forward, her movements predatory. Amaris's growl deepened, hackles rising. "I don't know what that means," Rowan said. "Liar." Alirai was close now, close enough that he could see the silver flecks in her golden eyes, could smell something like ozone and night-blooming flowers. Her fingers stopped inches from his chest, hovering over the place where the warmth lived. Her hand trembled. "You feel it," she said. "The bond, you feel her inside you." "Yes. Humans cannot bond with Vrykari. We are not compatible. Our biology, our neural pathways." "And yet here we stand," Rowan said quietly. Elirai's hand dropped. She turned to Amaris, knelt before her daughter, and touched her forehead to the younger Vrykari's brow. Silence stretched between them, some communication happening that Rowan couldn't access. Amaris made soft sounds, pleading, insistent. The Empress pulled back slowly, grief and wonder mixing in her expression. "She chose you," Alirai said. "Over everything, over her people, her birthright, over me." She stood, faced him fully. Tears tracked down her face, though her voice remained controlled. "Do you understand what a soul bond is, human?" "No. It is the joining of two souls, complete and irreversible. Vrykari bond once in their lifetime, if they are fortunate. My mate died when Amaris was an infant. The bond nearly killed me." Eliray's hands clenched at her sides. "Soul bonds do not cross species. They cannot. And yet my daughter has bonded with you, and I can feel it. I can feel you through her." The warmth in Rowan's chest pulsed, and Alirai flinched. "There's more," she said, her voice dropping. "Bonds can transfer through bloodlines. When a royal bonds, the connection creates echoes, resonances." She stepped closer. "Touch me, skin to skin. I need to know." Rowan hesitated, then extended his hand. Alirai grasped it, her fingers wrapping around his wrist, and the world exploded. The warmth became an inferno. He felt Amaris, bright and fierce. But beneath that, he felt Illyrae. Her presence crashed into him, grief and rage and loneliness and strength and something new and terrifying. Want? Illyrae gasped, her grip tightening until her claws pricked his skin. The bond roared between them, binding 3 souls together. No, she breathed. This cannot... She released him and staggered backward, breathing hard. Matriarch Illyrae? An older Vrykari female pushed through the guards, her blue fur faded to gray. What is happening? The bond has extended to me, Elder Morvain, Illyrae said, her voice shaking. Through Amaris, through bloodline resonance, I am bonded to this human. Silence, absolute devastating silence. Then chaos. The warriors began shouting, weapons powering up, voices demanding Rowan's immediate execution. Amaris snarled at her own people, defending him. Illyrae stood frozen, staring at Rowan like he was the answer to a question she'd never wanted to ask. The law is clear, Elder Morvain said, cutting through the noise. Unauthorized bonding with royalty is punishable by death. If you kill him, you kill us both, Illyrae said. Soul bonds cannot be broken. 3 souls, 1 bond. We live together or die together. Morvain's ears flattened. Then what do you propose? The purity laws did not account for this, Illyrae interrupted. No one could have predicted a cross-species bond. Which is why the Grand Council must decide, Morvain said. You must return to the throne world immediately. Illyrae looked at Rowan, measuring him through the bond. Very well, prepare the ships. She turned back to him, her voice low. You will come with us. As my guest, my bonded, the council will decide our fates. I understand, Rowan said. Do you? Her eyes searched his face. They will try to find a way to break the bond, and if they succeed, they will execute you. Then we don't let them break it. Something flickered across her expression, surprise or the beginning of respect. Your courage will not save you from Vrykari politics. Maybe not, but it's all I have. Illyrae held his gaze a moment longer, then turned away, issuing orders. The clearing became organized chaos. Amaris pressed against Rowan's leg, her anxiety bleeding through the bond. He knelt beside her. We'll figure this out, he murmured. All 3 of us. Illyrae's ship was organic curves blended with metallic structures, everything flowing together as if grown. Inside, the walls pulsed with bioluminescent light, and it smelled like ozone and flowers. They placed him in luxurious quarters clearly designed for prisoners. Amaris refused to leave his side, and after a brief argument in Vrykari, Illyrae allowed it. The Empress appeared in his doorway an hour into the journey, her armor replaced by flowing garments. We need to talk, she said, about what to expect. She moved to the viewport, watching stars streak past. The Grand Council consists of 7 matriarchs. They advise the throne and can overrule even an Empress in extreme cases. This will be extreme. What will they want? Proof. Evidence that the bond is real, that it cannot be broken, that it does not weaken the Imperial line. She glanced at him. They will also want to understand you. Humans are largely unknown to us. You are considered primitive. I gathered that from the swift execution offer. Her lips twitched almost a smile. That was generous. Normally I would have simply destroyed your settlement from orbit. Comforting. You should be afraid. The Council cares only about strength, about power, about what serves the Empire. Rowan crossed to where she stood, stopping just within arm's reach. The bond hummed between them. Then we show them the bond makes us stronger. You felt it in the battle. We moved as one. That has to count for something. Illyrae studied him, head tilted. You are either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. She smiled, and it transformed her face. My daughter chose well. You do not cower easily. The moment stretched between them, charged with something beyond the bond. Rowan felt her loneliness, her grief, the walls she'd built, and beneath all that, a spark that felt like hope. The council meets in 3 days, she said, finally stepping back. Until then, you will remain here. Do not embarrass me. I'll do my best. She moved toward the door, then paused. Rowan. It was the first time she'd used his name. He felt it resonate through the bond. Yes? Thank you. For saving her. Whatever the council decides, thank you for giving me back my daughter." Then she was gone, and Rowan was left with Amaris and the growing certainty that he'd fallen into something far more complicated than he'd imagined. 3 days to convince an empire that the impossible was real. He looked down at Amaris, who gazed back with knowing golden eyes. "No pressure," he muttered. Through the bond, he felt her amusement mixed with absolute confidence. He hoped it wasn't misplaced. The throne world appeared through the viewport like a jewel. Blue oceans, emerald forests, cities glowing even in daylight. Rowan had seen alien worlds before, but none that looked so deliberately crafted. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Elaray said from behind him. He hadn't heard her enter. She moved like water when she wanted to. "It looks ancient," he said. 10,000 years of civilization. My ancestors shaped this world to their vision, every city, every forest, deliberate. That must be a heavy legacy." "You have no idea." The ship descended and Rowan caught glimpses of the capital, spires reaching impossible heights, structures that seemed grown rather than built, bridges spanning distances without visible support. They landed in the Imperial gardens, vast green spaces surrounding the palace. Elder Morvain met them at the platform. "The council has convened," she said. "They await you immediately." The council chamber was circular, 7 thrones arranged in a semicircle. The matriarchs who occupied them were each unique, different shades of blue, different patterns of silver markings. But they all shared the same ancient eyes, the same weight of authority. Elarai led him to the central platform. Amaris followed, refusing to be separated. "Matriarch," Elarai said, her voice formal. "I present Rowan Ashford, human, bonded to the heir Amaris, and through her, bonded to me." Silence. Then one matriarch leaned forward, older than the others, her fur almost white, her eyes sharp. "Impossible," she said flatly. "Yet here we stand, Matriarch Selenis," Elarai replied. "The bond is real, it cannot be denied." "It can be investigated," another matriarch spoke. "If this bond exists, we will understand it. And if it is false—" "It is not false," Elarai said, steel in her voice. "Then prove it," Selenis said. "Let our specialists examine the human, test the bond's integrity." Rowan felt Elarai's reluctance through the bond, but she nodded. "I will remain present during all examinations." Acceptable. The specialists arrived within the hour, 3 Vrykari in marked robes carrying humming devices. They studied him like a specimen. Blood samples, neural scans, resonance readings that made the warmth in his chest flare. Elarai stood nearby, her presence constant. Amaris watched with suspicion, growling when they came too close. "Remarkable," one muttered, studying a holographic display. "The neural pathways are completely incompatible, yet they've merged, created something new." They conferred in rapid Vrykari, then turned to Elarai. "The bond is genuine, Empress, unprecedented. The human's neural structure has adapted to accommodate Vrykari resonance patterns." "Can it be broken?" Selenis asked. The specialists exchanged glances. "Theoretically, yes, but the feedback would be catastrophic. All 3 subjects would die within minutes." Selenis's ears flattened. "Then we cannot simply execute the human." "This is unacceptable," another matriarch said, standing. "The purity laws exist for a reason. The Imperial bloodline cannot be compromised by inferior genetic material." Rowan felt Elarai's anger spike through the bond. But he stepped forward first. "With respect, matriarch, I'm standing right here. If you're going to insult my species, at least do it to my face." The chamber went silent. Several matriarchs looked shocked he'd spoken. Selenis's eyes narrowed. "You dare address this council directly." "I dare to defend myself when called inferior, yes. For prey." "I'm not prey, neither is my species. We may not have your technology or lifespan, but we've survived wars, plagues, extinction events. We've built civilizations from nothing. We endure." He felt Elarai's surprise followed by pride. "Pretty words," Selenis said. "But words do not prove worth. What value does a human bring to the Imperial bloodline?" The chamber doors burst open. Warriors poured through, and behind them, Archduke Sorrentine. "Apologies, honored matriarchs," he said, smiling. "But I bring evidence of treason. The Empress has conspired with this human to weaken our defenses. That's a lie, Rowan said. Is it? Then explain the human ships at our border, their weapons platforms powered up. Because you sent them a message claiming I'd taken a human hostage, Illyrae said. You wanted a diplomatic incident. Prove it. Amaris lunged forward, snarling. She'd recognized something in Sorrentine's scent or posture. Chaos erupted. Sorrentine's guards moved. Illyrae's warriors responded. The council chamber became a battlefield, and Rowan found himself in the center. He grabbed Amaris, pulling her back. Through the bond, he felt Illyrae moving, felt her combat instincts, and without thinking, moved with her. They fought synchronized, anticipating each other's needs. When Illyrae engaged two guards, Rowan covered her flank. When plasma fire forced him into cover, she eliminated the shooter. Amaris darted between them, disrupting attacks before they landed. The matriarchs watched in stunned silence as the bonded trio dismantled Sorrentine's forces in under 2 minutes. When the last guard fell, Sorrentine stood alone, weapons trained on him. Matriarchs, Illyrae said, barely breathing hard. I believe we've demonstrated the bond's practical applications. Selena stared at them. Then, incredibly, she laughed, a sound like breaking ice. Well, that was unexpected. She descended from her throne, approaching the platform. Up close, Rowan could see scars marking her arms, evidence of centuries of survival. You fight well together, she said. The bond guides you. Yes. It makes us stronger, not weaker. Perhaps, but strength alone does not justify breaking our most sacred laws. Selenis looked at Rowan. The human must prove he is worthy of the bloodline he's joined. What would you have me do? Rowan asked. Survive. The traditional trial for those who would join the Imperial family through bonding. 3 challenges, mind, body, spirit. Succeed, and you will be recognized as consort to the Empress. Fail, and we will find a way to break the bond. Consequences be damned. I accept. Illyrae's hand found his, fingers intertwining. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. Yes, I do, for her, for you, for us. Through the bond, he felt her fear warring with hope. Then we begin at dawn, Selenis said. Rest well, human, you will need it. As guards led Sorrentine away, Illyrae pulled Rowan close, her forehead resting against his. Don't die tomorrow, she whispered. I'm not ready to lose you. I'm not planning on it. She kissed him then, quick, fierce, tasting like ozone and promise, and the bond surged between them. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Dawn came too quickly. Rowan woke with Amaris curled against his chest, and Illyrae's presence warm in his mind through the bond. She hadn't stayed the night. Protocol forbade it before the trials, but he felt her anyway, awake somewhere in the palace, her anxiety matching his own. A servant arrived to escort him to the trial grounds. Amaris refused to be left behind, patting at his heels as they walked through corridors of white stone and living wood. Other Vrykari watched them pass, some curious, others openly hostile. Word had spread fast. The arena was ancient, carved into a natural amphitheater at the palace's edge. Thousands of Vrykari filled the terraced seats, their presence a wall of sound and scent that made Amaris press closer to his leg. The 7 matriarchs sat in a raised box, Illyrae standing among them, her face carefully neutral, though the bond betrayed her terror. Selenis rose as Rowan entered the arena floor. Rowan Ashford, human, you have claimed bond right to the Imperial bloodline. To prove your worth, you will face 3 trials. Fail any one, and the bond will be severed regardless of cost. Do you understand? I understand. Then let us begin. The first trial, mind. You will face our greatest strategist in a game of territorial conquest. Defeat him, or prove yourself his equal. You have 1 hour. A section of the arena floor shifted, rising into a platform covered in holographic projections, a star map with hundreds of systems, fleets, resources. Across from him, a male Vrykari took position, his armor marked with strategic honors. I am Kelrith, he said. I have commanded Imperial fleets for 3 centuries. You are an academic who plays at soldier. This will be brief. The game began. Rowan studied the map, recognizing the basic structure. Territory control, resource management, fleet positioning, not unlike human strategy games, but with variables he'd never seen. Kelrith moved first, claiming key systems with aggressive efficiency. Rowan countered conservatively, establishing defensive positions, gathering intelligence on the rules through observation. Kelrith smiled, pressing his advantage, driving deep into Rowan's territory. "You play like prey," the strategist said. "Cautious, reactive, already you lose." But Rowan was learning. He noticed patterns in how resources flowed, how fleets moved, the hidden mechanics Kelrith exploited. And he noticed something else. The Vrykari fought with overwhelming force, never considering that weakness might be strategy. 20 minutes in, Rowan shifted tactics. He abandoned entire sectors, pulling his forces back, concentrating them. Kelrith pursued, overextending, confident in his advantage. Then Rowan struck. Not at Kelrith's fleets, but at his supply lines, the undefended systems that fed his advance. Kelrith's smile faded. He tried to recover, pulling forces back, but Rowan had already seized the infrastructure. The tide turned. Within 40 minutes, Kelrith's position collapsed, his fleet stranded without resources. "Impossible," Kelrith breathed. "You adapted. Mid-game, you changed your entire approach." "That's what humans do," Rowan said. "We adapt, we survive." Selenis stood. "The first trial is complete. The human has proven his mind. Now the body. You will face our champion in single combat. There are no rules except survival." A female Vrykari entered the arena, larger than Elleray, her body scarred from countless battles. She carried no weapons, didn't need them. Her claws extended, each one sharp enough to cut through bone. "I am Champion Rivka," she said. "I will make this quick, human. You have courage, but courage dies easily." Rowan had no illusions about winning through strength. She outweighed him, had natural weapons he lacked, reflexes honed over lifetimes. But he'd fought things that wanted him dead before. He knew how to survive. Rivka lunged. Rowan sidestepped, used her momentum against her, struck at pressure points he'd studied in the medical examinations. She snarled, surprised, adjusted instantly. They circled, traded blows, and he felt the bond open wider. Elleray wasn't just watching, she was feeding him information, her combat experience flowing through their connection. He saw Rivka's attacks before they landed, felt Elleray's instincts guiding his defense. When Rivka came in low, he was already moving high. When she feinted left, he didn't fall for it. The crowd's roar intensified. But he was still human, still slower, still weaker. Rivka's claws caught his shoulder, tearing through fabric and skin. Pain exploded through him, and through the bond. Illyrai gasped. Amaris snarled from the sidelines. Rowan staggered, blood running down his arm. Rivka pressed her advantage, driving him back toward the arena wall. He was losing. He knew it. She knew it. Then he felt something else through the bond, not just Ellyray's skill, but her absolute faith in him. Her certainty that he would survive because he had to, because she needed him to. The warmth in his chest ignited. Rowan stopped retreating. When Rivka came at him again, he moved inside her guard, too close for her claws, and struck with everything he had. Elbow to her throat, knee to her sternum, movements taught by instructors in a war he'd tried to forget. Rivka stumbled. He swept her legs, drove her down, and pinned her with leverage that had nothing to do with strength. "Yield," he said, his forearm across her throat. Rivka stared up at him, shock clear in her eyes. Then she tapped the ground twice. "Yield." The arena exploded with sound, some cheering, others outraged. Rowan stood, offering Rivka his hand. She took it, letting him help her up, and nodded once with something that might have been respect. Selenis was laughing again, that ice-breaking sound. "Twice you surprise us, human. The bond guides you. We all saw it. The Empress fought through you." She descended to the arena floor, the other matriarchs following. "The final trial, Spirit, this one requires no combat, no strategy, only truth." She stopped directly in front of him. "Why do you want this? Why fight for a place in our world when your own species awaits? You could walk away, return to your life. We could suppress the bond, manage the pain. You would survive." "And they wouldn't," Rowan said. "Amaris and Elleray would die if the bond broke. You said so yourself. We would find another way. Medical intervention, perhaps. Experimental procedures. They might survive." "Might isn't good enough." "So you do this out of obligation? Guilt?" "No. Rowan looked past Selenis to where Elire stood, her golden eyes locked on his. I do this because 18 months ago, I found something dying and chose to save it. Because Amaris trusted me when she had no reason to. Because Elire looks at me like I'm not just some primitive curiosity, but something more. He stepped closer to Selenis, meeting her ancient gaze. I do this because the bond showed me what I was missing. Connection, purpose, love, even if it makes no sense, even if it crosses every boundary that should exist. I'm not here because I have to be. I'm here because there's nowhere else I want to be. Silence filled the arena. Selenis studied him for a long moment, then turned to the other matriarchs. I have seen enough. The human has proven mind, body, and spirit. I vote to recognize the bond and accept him as Imperial consort. I concur, another matriarch said, then another. Within moments, all 7 had spoken. Elire moved before they finished, crossing the arena floor, and when she reached him, she kissed him properly, not the quick, fierce press from yesterday, but deep and claiming, her hands in his hair, her body against his, the bond singing between them. The crowd's reaction didn't matter. Amaris's pleased chirp didn't matter. Only this, the taste of her, the feel of her, the absolute certainty flowing through the bond that this was right. When they finally pulled apart, Elire was smiling, tears tracking down her face. You're insane, she whispered. Completely. And mine. Yes. She took his hand, turned to face the assembled Vrykari, and raised their joined hands high. Behold your future, she called out, her voice carrying across the arena. A bond that should not exist, yet does, a human who proved himself worthy, a new beginning for the Empire. The cheering started small, scattered, then built into a roar that shook the ancient stone. That night, in Elire's private chambers, they consummated the bond properly. She led him through rooms filled with soft light and silken fabrics, her armor abandoned, her hair loose around her shoulders. Amaris had been settled in an adjoining room, comfortable but separate. Some things required privacy. Elire's touch was gentle at first, exploring, learning the differences between their bodies. He mapped the silver markings on her skin with his fingers, his lips, discovering that they were sensitive, that touching them made her gasp. She learned his weaknesses too, the places that made him shudder, the words that made him grip her tighter. The bond amplified everything. He felt her pleasure as his own, felt her building need, her desire mixing with tenderness, mixing with something fiercer. When they finally came together, it was like completing a circuit. The warmth in his chest exploded into pure light, and he felt not just Elire but Amaris too, the 3 of them connected, complete. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing patterns on her back. What happens now, he asked. Now we rule. Together, you'll need to learn our customs, our politics. It won't be easy. Sorrentine will try again, and others like him. But we'll face them. Together, he agreed. I never thought I'd bond again, she said quietly. After my first mate died, I was certain that part of me died too, and then my daughter chose you, and somehow impossibly, I found myself wanting again, hoping again. I'm glad she did. Choose me, I mean. Elire lifted her head, met his eyes. The next morning, they returned to his research station, now under Imperial protection, transformed into a sanctuary. Amaris raced through the forest she'd grown up in, joyful, free, while Rowan and Elire walked hand in hand beneath ancient trees. We should bring the council here sometime, Elire said. Show them what you built, what you protected. Think they'd understand? Maybe not, but they don't need to. I understand. That's enough. She stopped, pulled him close, pressed her forehead to his in the Vrykari gesture of deepest intimacy. Thank you, she whispered. For saving her, for fighting for us, for being brave enough to love what everyone said was impossible. Thank you for letting me. Amaris appeared through the underbrush, something small and wriggling in her jaws, her first successful solo hunt since returning. She dropped it at their feet, proud, seeking approval from both of them. Rowan knelt, praised her, felt her joy through the bond. Elire joined them, and they stayed that way for a long moment. 3 souls, 1 family, bound together by something that shouldn't exist but did anyway. Love, Rowan had learned, didn't follow rules. It didn't care about species or politics or what was supposed to be possible. It simply was. And that, he thought, as Elire's laughter mixed with Amaris's pleased chirps, was more than enough.